intentional design. Today, Krista Galyen joins me and is going to share some instructional design tips and advice. Think of it like a Dear Abby, but for online designers and faculty. Her background is in research, development, evaluation, curriculum design, instructional design. But she is one of the most tremendous leaders and one of the reasons why people want to work at iDesign. So as a VP of Learner Experience Design here at iDesign, can you tell us a little bit about your role and the work that you enjoy most?
I would say one of the things that I enjoy the most is really just working with people. I've always worked with students, and I love the ability to have the potential to have really strong impact, to be able to direct people's lives. And even though I'm more remote from students, the student experience in helping directors work with partners and developing great programs for students. What I love the most about leadership is the ability to create experiences for colleagues so that they can come to work, they can feel valued. Like, what an amazing thing to be able to craft life for other people, so that then when they go to work, they're able to actually do great work and focus on creating great learning experiences within an environment that feels really healthy. They're able to go back to their families and feel rested, revitalized about what they do every day. So I would say that's probably one of the funnest things I like about working at iDesign.
You really focus in on making sure people are doing what they love, what brings them joy. And I think as an organization, we've really focused on that. I I know your story, but a lot of people won't know your background. Prior to getting into higher education and curriculum design, specifically in higher ed, you worked in K-12 and in special education. Can you tell me a little bit about what brought you joy in that position, working with the deaf and hard of hearing community?
So my first experiences were both at a center site. So center site for deaf and hard of hearing was primarily done in American Sign Language. So my master's degree was deaf and hard of hearing education, where the primary mode of communication was actually American Sign Language. So we would have interpreters for the hearing people that didn't know how to sign. And so when I went into programs, a center site pools students from around the county that whose primary language is American Sign Language, so that they have a community and communicate to each other. So I did that for a couple of years, and then I moved to rural Alaska, where I was a third and fourth and fifth grade teacher and followed a family, a child specifically, up through the grades, and was able to do both K-12 as well as special ed for that family. What I really loved about that was taking a situation where a student had little to no contact. She was one of two deaf children on the entire island. She didn't know how to write. They were just consonants, all writing consonants because she can't hear the language. And to be able to go from that to she won an award for writing a poem at the end of the year, at the end of her third grade year. It was pretty special. And her parents crying, saying she can talk to her teacher, right? We forget some of these things, that's not all kids can communicate to the people that are actually in positions of power over them. So being able to really acknowledge and help people thrive in different environments by looking at what is the current environment and how can I support them given what is currently available. So that was on the island, and then I moved to Anchorage and I did statewide deaf and hard of hearing consulting, where if there was a child born with a hearing loss in the state of Alaska, I would go there. I would drive. I would be on the back of a four-wheeler, be back on a sled, going to that school. And I was able to work in the communities, do health and hearing screenings. And it really gives you a healthy respect for all the different things that different communities need to deal with, different families. And it teaches you to listen to what the family's needs are and not just talk about recommendations, but really be open to all the different possibilities. So
Great stories, and it helps us really understand the lens that you bring to learning design. How has that experience really informed or influenced your work as a learning designer and as a leader of learning design teams when it comes to accessibility?
I would say one of the places that I worked was special education service agency, and I had the opportunity to be a colleague to Kathy Pravatsky, really wonderful accessibility guru. And one of the things that she really taught me was that with accessibility, or as an educator or as a deliverer of knowledge, you are in a position of power over the other people that you're needing to give access to. So, really thinking through the power that you yield or wield at any point in time. So, for example, uh, when I worked in the bush with certain students, being able to provide them signs and language that they could use in their local culture. So, whatever words that I gave them was the words that they had the ability to use. So, really thinking through all of those pieces to help that student have the ability to really speak their mind is the most important thing.
I think about some of the stories that you shared with me as transformational for the students that you've had the opportunity to help as a teacher, as an educator. And when we think about transformational learning experiences, right, we as learning designers have great power, to your point earlier. I think we've often talked about transactional versus transformational learning experiences, right, and how we can create community and connection, which is a lot of what you've talked about with the students that you've had the chance to interact with. Can you give me an example of how you create transformational learning and opportunities to connect in the courses that you teach?
I think, especially as designers, it's really important to collaborate with the faculty so they have a full understanding of the power and the ability that they hold to create community and support students. So, one of the things that I often do when I'm teaching, and it's very easy, is to remind the students that ultimately it's about achieving the learning outcomes. Now, there's differences between domains, but for what I teach, which is ed tech, it really is. You need to practice. I want to give you feedback, and I want you to do better, and I want you to show me the learning outcomes that you can do it, right? We would all probably agree to that, but what do we often see happens? You have a module one, they turn in the assignment, you grade them, and you're done. Module two, they turn in the assignment, you grade them, and they're done. But what I often do in my courses is I grade more harshly, but then I just say, go ahead, listen to my feedback, iterate it, turn it back in, I'll give you more points. It sounds very simple and you think it's a lot more work, but what I tell the students is I'm not going to grade it unless you actually listen to my feedback and show me that you're really trying to do a better job on the second round. Typically, it's graduate students that I'm doing this with. So for the most part, 99.9% of them are trying, and it's great. There's interesting side effects that happen from doing that. Yes, they definitely achieve the learning outcomes. They also do better on these end of course projects because they've been able to demonstrate along the way, right? If you grade them and don't give them the opportunity for feedback, they're going to fall further and further behind, especially if the ultimate outcome is cumulative in nature, right? Which ideally you want everything to connect. So it should. But the interesting consequence or side effect of doing this is that they feel so heard and seen and cared about as a student. And when I emphasize that that the emphasis is learning outcomes and demonstrating them, they tell me more about what's going on in their lives. They ask for leeway and patience. And I've been told, thank you for being so patient with me. Thank you for letting me know that I could turn it in one day late to show you all the amazing stuff that I can do because my father passed away, or my family had some issues, or I was a stay-at-home mom of a 3-year-old during the pandemic. Now, this is all just one semester, and those are all it gets heavier from there. And people are dealing with a lot, and to be able to just do this one simple thing of allowing them to demonstrate competency, of regrading and giving them feedback, it is amazing. Amazing at what change that will do for the students, at the feeling cared for that they feel. And I had one student actually tell me this past semester that they're also a teacher. And they said, I never thought about letting students regrade before. And I feel really embarrassed that I never did that and never thought about it. I'm going to do that going forward. And in fact, I'm going to allow my children, a little bit more leeway so that they're able to maybe show competency with cleaning their room instead of me taking away, 50 cents each time. So my goal was not to embarrass anyone by any means. But the fact that this simple thing resonated with her so deeply, it also shows me how many students desire this simple act of patience, generosity, which also results in better learning outcomes. So long-winded answer to a question.
No, actually, it showcases that you're grading or rewarding learning.
And persistence.
Right? Patience, application of new knowledge.
And the ability to get critiqued. All skills that if you do not have, you are not going to be successful in hardly any career. If you can't take feedback and apply it and get better, you're going to have a tough time. So it's not just about being easy, because when you grade and require them to actually show competency to get more points or a better grade, it's actually, you can be pretty hard on students. Hard meaning specific, and not giving them an okay or a check if they really haven't demonstrated it.
Yeah, I think often grading gets turned into a gotcha or overinflated, right? Grades tend to be overinflated, and we've read a lot about that. So it's a really interesting opportunity that people could consider the idea of regrading on a regular basis so that the students could demonstrate mastery.
Yeah, and I think an interesting point to your gotcha that some students see, many students in fact, because they don't really believe that I'm actually going to regrade at first. It takes a time, and then they realize, hey, this is actually really good for me. What I've also found is it decreases the stress of the student. And anyone who's an educator knows when you are stressed, your thinking goes from the frontal lobe down to your basal cortex, and you learn nothing, right? So it decreases the stress because it decreases, oh my gosh, what are they going to get me on this time? Did I see everything? Did I dot my I? Did I cross my T's at 1-inch margins? And they're not using all that precious brain power to focus on the learning outcomes. So, yeah, I have found that that's really helpful.
Awesome. Okay, so because this is the tips and tricks episode, can you provide one or two online course design tips that faculty could take away from this conversation and implement immediately to go from transactional to transformational learning in their courses?
First, what I just talked about. Now, a lot of faculty might say, yeah, but I can't do the regrade on everything. So think about what parts of your course you want students to practice before high stakes, right? So think of what is high stakes and what components can you give opportunities for practice and feedback on. This is best done if you have a project at the end of a course. So maybe rethink the possibility for that. But also think through how can you give those moments of feedback, because faculty forget that they are amazing professionals with a depth of knowledge that these students are absolutely hungry for. So them being able to provide feedback, they will eat it up. So find moments where you can do that. And then also, if you're going to do that, it's really helpful to have super clear rubrics. So while that might seem a little transactional at first, you can have conversations around that with your feedback. So it makes feedback a little easier to give, because then you're not focused on all these little tasks. You can say, look at my rubric feedback. Now, you can do this. Let me know if you have problems. Here's my advice. So it leaves room for really rich, personalized feedback that feels like you. And then the task-driven specific stuff can be left to you clicking the item on the rubric that really hones in on the specific aspects that they did well or needed to improve on.
Perfect. So ungrading and rubrics, top tips for today. Well, thanks so much for coming on, and we're going to have you back again soon because we could use some more tips and tricks. So thanks, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Whitney.